The command deck of the Earth Defense Fleet's high-orbit station buzzed with subdued tension. Through the massive observation window, Captain Darius Holt studied the endless black of space. Somewhere out there, just beyond Saturn's shadow, an alien armada was closing in, thousands of ships, the largest hostile force humanity had ever recorded. And Earth was sending just one ship. His ship. Still think they're joking? Lieutenant Jonah Marks asked, leaning on the console beside him. He was younger, his sharp features barely hiding the anxiety chewing at the edges of his usual sarcasm. A single cruiser against an empire? Someone's lost their mind. No joke, Darius replied. His voice was smooth, calm, the voice of a man who'd long stopped wasting energy on outrage. Orders are orders. Jonah scoffed. Right, and humans gonna mad. Darius finally turned from the window, his gaze steel and ice. That's the idea. Behind them, the heavy footsteps of Admiral Keegan echoed. He was a broad man, face mapped by decades of war, and his scowl looked permanent. Captain Holt, your ship is prepped. Launch in 30. Darius nodded. Understood. Keegan folded his arms. I've been in this game longer than most. Never have I seen a worse plan. One ship, they're going to carve you up and send the pieces back as a souvenir. That's likely, Darius agreed without flinching. But we're not going to make it easy for them. Jonah shifted uncomfortably. Sir, if I may ask, why us? Why the Valiant? There's an entire fleet docked below. Keegan's frown deepened, but Darius answered first. Because the Valiant is the fastest, the quietest, and the most expendable. Jonah blinked. Expendable? We're bait, Darius said. High-profile bait. Silence pressed into the room. Outside, the docking clamps began to disengage from the cruiser's hull. Keegan cleared his throat. This isn't how I wanted this war to start, but it's already here. If anyone can make something out of this mess, it's you, Holt. Just keep them guessing. Darius offered the faintest of smiles. We will. With nothing more to say, the Admiral left, leaving the two officers in the lingering quiet. Jonah tapped his fingers on the console, eyes darting to the growing line of status reports flooding in. We're not seriously just flying into that fleet, are we? Jonah asked. No backup. No exit strategy. Just us. Correct. That's insane. Probably. Jonah shook his head. What happens if we die out there? Darius adjusted his uniform collar and straightened his posture. Then we'll do it loudly. Moments later, they were aboard the Valiant. The crew, all hand-picked veterans, awaited orders in the command center. Men who had seen too much war and lived to take another mission that shouldn't have been theirs. Engineer Vasquez sat hunched over the power systems, double-checking the modifications no one had been authorized to discuss. Gunner Ryan Pierce leaned back in his chair, boots propped up, spinning a combat knife between his fingers like the situation was just another Tuesday bar fight. Status. Darius called as he entered. All systems green. Vasquez said without looking up. Weapons, shields, stealth drive. Whatever this mission is, the ship's ready. Pierce smirked. Ready to die gloriously, you mean? Jonah dropped into his chair. Oh, don't be so cheerful. Darius took the captain's seat, his fingers resting lightly on the armrests. Around him, the low hum of the ship's core vibrated through the deck plates. They were already drifting from the station, Earth shrinking behind them. The final transmission from command came through. Proceed to intercept. Engage at discretion. Intercept what? Pierce muttered. We're one ship. What's the plan? Insult them to death. We don't need to win, Darius said, voice low. We just need to make them notice. Jonah frowned. And if they notice too hard? Then we hit harder. It sounded absurd, but no one argued. Maybe they all knew that the only real strategy left was madness. The only way to face an overwhelming enemy was to become something unpredictable, something they couldn't classify. Humans had never been good at playing fair. As they breached the edge of Earth's defensive perimeter, the first long-range scans painted the alien force on the screen, rows upon rows of massive vessels, shapes that defied human design, organic curves, glowing cores, ships the size of cities moving in perfect silence. A living wall of extinction. Jonah swallowed. That's a lot. Yeah, Pierce said, twirling his knife. Now I really wish we brought a second ship. Darius didn't answer. He stared at the display, studying the formation, the patterns. He wasn't looking for a way out. He was looking for the weak point. There was always a weak point. Plot us a course, Darius ordered. Right through their center. Jonah blinked. The middle? You want us to cut through the middle? That's right. Pierce grinned. Now we're talking. Darius leaned back in his chair. Let's give them something to remember. As the Valiant accelerated, blue thrusters burning against the void, the crew settled into the rhythm of inevitable conflict. No reinforcements. No backup. Just one ship against an empire. Humans gonna mad. And that was exactly what they needed. Space stretched wide and silent ahead of the Valiant, the stars distant and uncaring. The alien fleet loomed like a wall of steel and light across the black, their ships vast and unknowable, each brimming with the promise of annihilation. To any sane mind, this was suicide. To the men aboard the Valiant, it was just another bad hand dealt by a universe that never played fair. Lieutenant Jonah Marks checked the scanner for the third time in 5 minutes, as if reality might shift into something kinder. Still there, he muttered, mostly to himself. In case anyone was wondering, the fleet hasn't vanished. Wasn't expecting a miracle. Engineer Vasquez said, without looking up from the reactor readouts. His voice was always low, calm, like a man who'd long since accepted the worst outcomes. Power cores are stable. Singularity housing is holding for now. Jonah shot him a look. Good. I'd hate for our experimental black hole gun to fall apart before we can even fire it. Across the deck, Gunner Ryan Pierce smirked without lifting his eyes from the targeting systems. Relax, Marks. We're all going to die eventually. Better here than rusting on some space station, waiting for retirement. Comforting, Jonah deadpanned. Captain Darius Holt sat at the helm, his gaze fixed forward, hands steepled beneath his chin. He hadn't spoken much since they had left the safety of Earth's defenses. No speeches, no reassurances. Just focus. That, more than anything, kept the crew from unraveling. If Darius wasn't panicking, they didn't get to panic either. Distance to the outer perimeter? Darius asked. 70,000 kilometers and closing. Jonah replied. They haven't moved. No formation shift. No targeting locks. They don't see us as a threat yet, Darius said. That's good. Let's keep it that way until we're inside their line. Jonah glanced at him. Inside their line? Captain, their line is built out of ships the size of continents. That's why we brought the big gun. Pierce chuckled. One ship. One shot. Whole lot of crazy. Humans gonna mad, Jonah muttered under his breath. Pierce pointed a finger at him. Now you're getting it. The bridge lights dimmed as the Valiant entered silent running. Energy rerouted to the singularity chamber below decks, where Vasquez worked like a surgeon. Every adjustment he made, every recalibration, was to ensure that the experimental weapon didn't implode before they had a chance to fire. Jonah glanced over the system logs. I still don't get why Command thought this was the best plan. You'd think a whole fleet would have made more sense. Would have made us a bigger target, Darius said. And a fleet can't sneak through the cracks. Pierce grinned. Yeah, we're like a cockroach with a nuke. That's the idea, Darius said, standing from his chair. He paced to the main viewport. Beyond it, the alien ships glittered like cold stars. Their formation was tight, precise, almost arrogant. They didn't expect anything to reach them, let alone hurt them. They're not ready for what we brought. Speaking of, Jonah said, Any chance you'll finally explain how the singularity cannon actually works before we pull the trigger? Vasquez snorted from his station. It works by either winning the war or ripping us into atoms. Not helpful. It compresses space, Darius said, eyes still locked ahead. Fires a gravitational collapse at the heart of the enemy. Theoretically, we carve a hole straight through their center. If it fails, he shrugged, we die. Wow, Pierce said. I was worried for a second there, but that cleared everything right up. They all laughed. Short, bitter, but real. The kind of humor that only men at the edge of doom could share. Coming up on the fleet's detection range, Jonah warned. We're not going to stay invisible much longer. Good, Darius said, returning to his seat. Time to wake them up. Pierce cracked his knuckles. Weapons primed. Singularity chamber at 90%, Vasquez added. We've got one shot. Maybe two if we're lucky. Darius leaned forward. Mark our course. Straight through the core of their formation. Jonah, keep shields tight. Pierce, fire at anything that moves. Vasquez, don't let that cannon kill us before the aliens do. Copy that, Vasquez said dryly. Jonah set the trajectory. We'll be in the thick of it in 5 minutes. Darius nodded. All hands brace for combat. The comms went quiet. No last words, no prayers. Just men doing their jobs, ready to meet the impossible with teeth bared. The alien ship stirred as the Valiant crossed the threshold. Scans flickered red as hundreds of targeting systems locked on. Energy signatures spiked across the board. Weapons charged. Pierce grinned, locking onto the closest destroyer. Showtime. As the first shots lit the darkness, the Valiant dove straight into the storm, a single mad ship carrying humanity's final gamble into the heart of an empire. The first volley struck the Valiant like a hammer. Shields flared, shimmering blue across the hull as plasma bolts and kinetic rounds splashed against the barrier. Alarms howled through the bridge, but Darius didn't flinch. He kept his eyes forward, watching the alien formation ripple and close around them like a tightening noose. Shields at 70%, Jonah reported, fingers dancing across the console. His voice stayed even, but sweat beaded on his forehead. We won't survive a direct hit from those capital ships. We won't give them the chance, Darius said. Pierce, light up the flank. Gladly. Pierce replied, his fingers gripping the targeting controls. A storm of missiles erupted from the Valiant's launch bays, streaking toward a cluster of smaller escort craft. Explosions dotted the void as the enemy ships broke apart, but the gap they left immediately filled with others. There's too many, Jonah muttered. This is suicide. No, Darius corrected. This is a distraction. Jonah looked over. For what? There's no backup coming. For us, Darius said, to get the shot. Below deck, Vasquez's voice crackled over comms. Singularity cannon charging. 95%. Don't shake us apart before I fire ya. Darius smirked. Do your part, Vasquez. We'll keep the rest off your back. The alien fleet adapted fast. Their ships move with organic, flowing precision, closing in from all sides. Energy beams sliced through the dark, narrowly missing the Valiant, as Jonah threw the ship into evasive maneuvers. We're boxed in, Jonah warned. If we slow down, we're toast. Then we won't slow down, Darius said. Drive us right through. Pierce cackled. Now that's the spirit. The hull groaned as the ship pushed its engines to the brink. The Valiant shot forward, skimming the underbelly of a massive alien dreadnought. Pierce fired a spread of torpedoes into its engines, and the resulting explosion lit the bridge in brilliant orange. That's one, Pierce said with a grin. 99,000 to go, Jonah muttered. Correction, Vasquez interrupted. Cannon charged. Target locked. On your command, Captain. Darius's gaze shifted to the central view screen. There, beyond the tangled web of enemy ships, pulsed the alien flagship, a monstrosity of black alloy and golden light, bigger than a city, older than anything humans had ever built, and if their scans were right, the nerve center of the entire invasion force. "Bring us about," Darius ordered. "Point us right at the flagship." Jonah's eyes widened. "You want a straight shot?" "Yes." Pierce whistled. "Now we're just showing off." The ship spun hard, inertia pressing the crew into their seats as the Valiant banked through a storm of enemy fire. Shields dimmed with every hit. Hull plating sparked and buckled in places. But the ship held together, and for a fleeting moment, there was a clear path. Target in sight, Vasquez confirmed. Singularity cannon ready. Darius stood, as if sheer force will alone would steady the ship through the chaos. He glanced once at Jonah, then Pierce. "This is it," Darius said. "Fire." The deck trembled as a cannon discharged. From beneath the ship, reality bent inward. A sphere of impossible gravity launched toward the alien flagship, distorting space itself as it traveled. Enemy ships scrambled to evade, but it was too late. The Singularity detonated at the heart of the fleet's command vessel, collapsing the ship into itself. For a few seconds, nothing existed in that space, just a black wound where something massive had been. The shock wave rippled outward. Smaller vessels shattered. Larger ones reeled as command links broke and formations disintegrated. The bridge fell silent. Jonah finally exhaled. "Did we just win?" "No," Darius said quietly. "We bought time." Pierce spun his chair toward the captain. "They're scrambling. Confused. Should we make a run for it?" Darius shook his head. "We didn't come here to run." On the view screen, the fleet reorganized. Whatever had been lost in leadership was quickly being compensated by sheer numbers and instinct. Dozens of ships shifted, angling toward the Valiant. Lights blinked across the tactical display. Hundreds of lock-ons. Thousands. Jonah's fingers hovered over the controls. "We're about to get buried." "Then we take as many as we can with us," Darius said. "Singularity cannon?" Vasquez asked. "I can try for another shot, but the core is overheating. She might go up with us." "That's fine," Darius replied. "One more. Make it count." Pierce grinned, wicked and fearless. "Humans gonna mad." "Exactly," Darius said. "Let's remind them why they should be afraid." As the fleet surged forward, the Valiant turned to meet them head-on. Lights blinked red across every system. Hull integrity warnings screamed. But none of that mattered. They were alive. They were dangerous. And they weren't finished yet. The Singularity cannon hummed, building toward one last impossible shot. Outside the window, the enemy came like a tidal wave. And Darius Holt smiled. The hum of the Singularity cannon grew into a low, bone-deep vibration that rattled the very frame of the Valiant. Warning lights strobed across the bridge. Heat levels redlined. Structural integrity plummeted with every second the cannon charged beyond its limit. And still, no one left their station. Jonah wiped sweat from his brow as the targeting system blinked in and out. "Cannon, at 120%. We push any harder, Vasquez, and we're going to punch a hole through our own ship." "Already punching," Vasquez answered over the comms, his voice strained. "Containment fields are barely holding. If we fire, we either save the day or tear ourselves out of existence. Flip a coin." Pierce barked a laugh. "Perfect odds." On the screen ahead, the alien fleet surged like a living beast. Without their command ship, they'd turned from coordinated precision into a stampede of rage. But even disorganized, they outnumbered the Valiant 1,000 to 1, and they were closing in fast. "Captain," Jonah said quietly, "this is it." Darius Holt stood at the center of the bridge, calm as stone. His eyes reflected the chaos beyond the viewport, the deadly ballet of ships and fire. He wasn't a man given to speeches, and now was no exception. "Target the center of the swarm," Darius ordered, "right through the heart." Pierce locked in the coordinates. "Locked." When you're ready, boss. The first wave of alien fighters opened fire, strafing the Valiant from every angle. Shields flickered and collapsed. Hull plates sheared away. The ship groaned as if it could feel its own impending death. "Hold steady," Darius said. On the lower deck, Vasquez overrode the safeties and rerouted every last drop of power into the cannon. "She's ready. And, we are absolutely going to die." "Understood," Darius replied without a flicker of doubt. Jonah looked over. "It's been an honor, sir." Pierce gave a mock salute. "Hell of a last ride." The alien fleet tightened around them. There was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. But that had never been the point. Darius straightened his shoulders. Fire. The Singularity cannon unleashed its final shot. This time, there was no elegant pulse of energy, no graceful ripple through the void. The weapon tore itself apart as it expelled a singularity of such magnitude that the stars themselves seemed to bend toward it. At the center of the enemy fleet, space collapsed. Ships were dragged inward, crushed and shattered, one after another, until the vacuum itself seemed to scream. What had been a swarm became a graveyard in seconds, debris scattering into the abyss. The shock wave struck the Valiant. The bridge erupted in sparks. Jonah was thrown from his chair. Pierce braced against the console, grinning through bloodied teeth. "Status?" Darius asked, as if they hadn't just unleashed the most destructive force mankind had ever built. Jonah crawled back to his seat, fingers flying over what remained of the controls. "Hull is gone. Shields are gone. Engines are offline. But—" He looked up, blinking. "The fleet is gone, too." Silence settled over the bridge. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Pierce broke the quiet. "I think we won." Vasquez's voice came through, weak but alive. "Cannon's dead. Ship's dead. I'm mostly dead. But yeah, feels like a win." Darius allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Mission complete. Jonah leaned back, staring at the wreckage outside the viewport. "And now what? We're adrift in the middle of nowhere. No backup. No way home. We finished what we started," Darius said. "Send the transmission. Let Earth know the job's done." Pierce raised an eyebrow. "Think anyone will believe it? One ship against all that." "They'll believe the silence," Darius replied. Jonah keyed up the comms, transmitting the final message back to Earth. Short, simple, mission accomplished. Fleet destroyed. Status stranded. The beacon pulsed into the dark. Outside the ship, debris drifted quietly. What remained of the alien armada scattered like dust on the solar wind. And aboard the Valiant, the crew settled into the quiet aftermath of madness. "We got maybe a few hours of life support," Vasquez reported. "Anyone want to play cards?" Pierce chuckled. "Only if we make the stakes ridiculous." Jonah shook his head. "We just wiped out an entire alien fleet. There's no higher stakes left." Darius looked out at the empty expanse where the enemy had been. His expression remained unreadable, but the weight in his voice was clear. "Humanity's still out there," he said. "As long as they are, the fight's never over." And as the stars drifted around them, the men of the Valiant waited in the wreckage they created, knowing they'd bought their people time. Maybe that was enough. Maybe madness had its place, after all.